All right, Eric, that hat. Everybody wants that hat. Heck, you haven't even given me one. Let's talk about that hat. And let's talk about, you've coined a new term, and it's pretty cool, about Ephraim's phylactery. So let's talk about phylactery.
Ephraim's
I've always thought,
phylactery.
I've always thought, that this is just to keep his words in the forefront of our frontal cortex at all times, and then the wrapping of the hands and things like that. It's just, and applying those words to our work, our efforts, everything that we do. Let's expound on that, and let's talk about that hat. And you got any plans for people so they can get this hat, or they can get a stencil, or what are you going to do about that?
Well, where this comes from is Deuteronomy 6:8 and Deuteronomy 11:18. It says you will wrap these matters around your hand and as frontlets between your eyes. So just real quick, this whole study I'm doing, Erichtology, is all about the spelling of words and what those words then mean because they're spelled that way. So we're just looking at the decomposition of the structure of a word, reverse engineering it, as you would say, breaking it down into its smaller elements, components, which is to say, each individual letter, looking at verb roots, looking at prefixes and suffixes, and then looking at similar words or other words that are spelled with those same letters to try to find the essence or you might say the juice of the word. The interesting thing, this word, it says it will be for an ornament between your eyes. There's different words for ornament or to be adorned. It's not this word. This word is spelled differently in both places. It's lamed tet tet pei tav, and then the other place it's lamed tet vav tet pei tav. You try to look that word up in the dictionary, it's not there. So the only way you can figure out what this word really means is to look at variations of the spelling of different words that have either a lamed, a tet, and a pei, or a lamed, a tet, and a vav pei, or two tets, or a tet and a pei, or an aleph, tet, yod, pei. None of them say ornament. So the word ornament is some translators' interpretation that I can't really find by looking through the dictionary. But what it can mean, the word nun tet pei means to drop or drip, and as this raindrop shape, it's also aleph, tet, yod, pei is a hole in cheese, like in Swiss cheese. What does an ornament have to do with the hole in Swiss cheese have to do with a raindrop? Well, some necklaces or earrings are a pendant, like this little drop, and what is it that ornaments Swiss cheese? The holes. That's what distinguishes it. So there's something about this little token of embellishment. Well, the previous reference when it says bind them as a sign upon your hand, that word sign is aleph-vav-tav, which is a signal, a sign. It's pronounced oath, which is where we get oath, which is also that little glyph which represents a promise, an agreement. It's also a letter of the aleph-bet. Literally, the letter of the aleph-bet is an aleph-vav-tav, an oath. So when he says, bind them on your hands as could be like a letter of the aleph-bet. So the letter of the aleph-bet is like these little drops that make up the whole alphabet, each letter, and the letters that make up the words. So what I'm trying to say here is that to have as a hatband the alphabet, the aleph-bet, the letters, kind of fits what he's saying. He says, let them be between your eyes. Well, the alphabet isn't between my eyes, but the word bean, bet yod nun, not only means between, but it means consider, evaluate, weigh this compared to that, think about it, look real carefully, and that's exactly also what the word ayin means. Eyeball, ayin means deliberate exactly, weigh carefully. It talks about what is visible. What did he give us? The letters of the alphabet. And it means explain wisely. The word lamed vav tet means covered or secretly or enveloped, which is to say wrapped around, like my head is enveloped by this hat. The word chok, which is the commandments, which he told us by using words, which is letters, literally means engrave, drawn, something written, something carved, like his finger on the tables of stone. It also is a prescribed statute, or that which is due as an obligation, but it's also your portion, which is your rights. And it's also truth and necessity. So the things he gave us as commandments, delivered via the vehicle of words, were not only what we have to do, it's what we get to do, and it's our responsibility, and it's our benefit. It's our perks, you might say, of being in the kingdom. So these same words that we think is the law is also our great reward and privilege of what we get to do in his kingdom. We don't see him that way. So by having him around our head, it fits, because the word for band, like I say, have them be as a band whereby they serve to mediate your contemplation of what each letter means. That's another way to read essentially what it says to do. So the Jews, brother Yehuda, the one of the 12 tribes, and then Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, making it kind of sort of 13 tribes. So brother Yehuda of one of the 13 names of tribes does it a certain way. They wrap these things on their arm, put this thing with a box on their head. Shinto priests do the same type of a thing. And they have tzit-tzit to remind them, but they have white ones. Ephraim, people out here in the wilderness, make different colored ones. And I've seen all kinds of different colors that people have. Beautiful, different knots, different patterns. He never says you can't have different colors or beads or buttons sewn into it. He just says,
get some blue in there.
Yourself.
Get some blue in there.
Put a blue thread. Brother Yehuda typically doesn't put a blue thread. He's got a reason, perhaps it's even a good reason. But the instructions say, tie for yourself these tzitzis, and then you will see it, you'll see the blue thread, and you'll remember my words to do them. The interesting thing about tzit-tzit, they're also like, it's kind of embarrassing. He said, this is your glory. This is something to catch the eye, and you go, whoa, hey. It's like wearing an officer's pin. If you're in the military, it's like, oh, that guy's wearing the pin. He must be important, or he must have privilege. We've got the wrong connotation about the things Yahuwah told us to do. He said these will be an adorning splendor of prestige. But we don't regard them as that. We think of them as an encumbrance. And
I do.
So he says also in Isaiah 8:16, fasten this warning, seal the teaching onto my students. Fasten what warning? Where is it fastened? We'd have to go back and look at Isaiah 8:12 through 16 to see what he's talking about. There's another place, Isaiah 24:14, says, they will raise their voice and shout the name of Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, as he brings them deliverance and victory. He tells us to remember these things. I've got a whole list here of various things that Yahweh told us, which is to say, these are the instructions which if you do them, you will be successful. He will intervene with a surprising and radical deliverance and victory. And the enemies, there's one place here where he says that Isaiah 19:14, Yahweh will give a spirit of insanity to our enemies, and as a drunkard staggers and falls face at first into his own vomit,
well,
so will our
that kind of
enemies do the
describes
same.
the church right now.
What's that?
That kind of describes the church right now.
Whoever those folks is, if we do what he said, he will put the dread of Yahweh on our enemies. 2 Chronicles 17:10. Sennacherib, 2 Chronicles 32:21. 2 Chronicles 15, there was a 1,000,000-man army, from Ethiopia and Cush, routed because the king of Israel turned to Yahweh. Sennacherib, I think the story was 85,000 or 185,000 overnight, deceased. Sennacherib went back and was assassinated after he had defied and thumbed the nose and blasphemed Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. What I'm saying is, repeatedly, Yahweh has told us, return to these words. 1 Kings 3:28, Solomon, the wisdom of Elohim was within him to do mishpat. This is all about this word mishpat. It's a balancing of scales. Mishpat is translated a number of different ways, judgments. is usually it, but what he says is this. What you do, each man is going to have his way returned upon his head. If you do Torah, which is truth and kindness and goodness and rightness, that's what's returned. But if you, to the degree that you betray those standards and do corrupt and evil and conniving and bloodshed and theft and lying, to that degree, that's what's going to come upon each man, his family, and his nation. When Solomon did what was right, good mishpat, 1 Kings 4:20, Judah and Israel were numerous like the sand of the seashore for multitude, eating, drinking, rejoicing. That's the reward. That's the purpose. It's not that necessarily, oh, let's take over the world and dominate it and smash everybody else down. Yahweh grants us favor to have a pleasant life without the oppression, without grinding each other's faces into the gravel. As we do to one another, so it's done to us. We start treating each other with truth and kindness, emet and chesed, as he says repeatedly. Doing mishpat, so zadikah, which is righteous, but it's also deliverance, victory, and salvation, will flow like a river when we balance the scales of mishpat like water, which is finding perfect balance. All these concepts are embedded within his words, and if we look at his words and see what they mean, what did he say? What did he mean? Think, consider, deliberate, balance exactly, talk about it one amongst another. Malachi 3:16. Then those who feared Yahweh got together and talked about his Shem, his name, his word, his principles, what he's all about. And as they contemplated Yahweh's Shem,
He's got a book.
he calls for a book to be presented in the names of those who think and consider and contemplate his name. Their names are written in this book for eternal reference. And he said they will be his ornaments, like a crown with ornamentation of jewels, like these letters on our head. He's going to make up his treasures, his crown, and his jewels are going to be those who consider and contemplate his ways.
Sounds like the bride.
There's so many verses that talk about this.
That's beautiful.
To think that the status of the world right now, here it is, the day after Shemini Atzeret 2015. I was talking to a fellow the other day, and as he pictures, I've talked to numerous people who've pictured it, we're like on this freight train with no brake on a downhill, out of control, going a couple hundred miles an hour, headed for absolute destruction, and nobody can see a way for that train to be stopped. There's an interesting tool that just came out recently called Saw Stop. It's a high-powered circular saw, and the folks who've designed it, it's got an electronic device that if it touches your flesh, instantly a block is thrown in and that blade stops. You test it out with hot dog, throw it in there, and it'll put the line on the edge of the skin of the hot dog, but it won't even cut the skin. It's an incredible invention. What a tool. Yeah. But it's a picture of Yastop. Though this looks like it's going full speed, he can stop instantly anything.
Hallelujah.
Reroute it because he is Yahweh Elohim.
Do not fear.
The mighty one, the Kadosh of Israel. We got to know his words and trust that what he said was true and active and viable and pertinent for us today. And it doesn't matter how fast this train is going, how out of control, the fact there's no brakes, the fact that it looks like the circumstances of this world is headed for instantaneous, any second now, this cataclysmic destruction. Yahweh, I believe in his word, says that he will stop that and turn it around and favor his people and exalt, so that we can say, exalt his word, lifting up Israel, his people, so that we can say, he said it and he did it. Kavod b'shem Yahweh. Glory in the name of Yahweh.
I like to always remind him of those words. If there's any problem in my life, and I'll go through and I'll remind him, I'll speak his words back to him and say, this isn't happening, why isn't this happening? If there's something in me that needs corrected, please show it to me, because I want these words to be established, because you said it, and I know you can't lie.
There's a verse that we've been saying in Psalms 136, every other verse, every other line says, Hodu la Yahweh ki tov ki leolam chazdo.
Beautiful song.
It's also in 1 Chronicles 16:34, that phrase is, and also in 2 Chronicles 20:21. What it says was, the men went out and said that line, the enemy was routed. All they did was go out, not just say the words like a magical incantation, but they lifted up their voices unto Yahweh and they shouted, Hodu la Yahweh ki tov, ki le'olam chazdo. Give thanks unto Yahweh for goodness, for eternal is his tender loving kindness.
That's awesome, Eric.
Amen.
Now, what about a stencil for this hat band? People are asking about this. What are you going to do about that?
This was actually hand painted, but what I did on the website, and my wife Karen has sent a PDF file to some people, you'll see this, just called the hat band. It's this slight arc with the letters with the aleph-tav in the middle. So it's aleph wrapped around, meeting up with tav, so it reads aleph-tav in the center. So you can copy that. That the curve of that hat band is just right on that PDF file to match a hat. If you do it straight, it's not going to lay right. Some folks in the Midwest, I'm sorry, I forget the name of those who did it, but they were working on making an embroidery, which I had requested about 5 years ago for people to, somebody to work on to make available. But the thing is, a few days ago I went to the printer and asked them to cut out the PDF file as a stencil.
Awesome.
On a sticky back, so it could be stuck to the hat band, and then you copy it out in pencil, and then I just hand painted this with white fabric paint. That's all this is. These hats are from Duluth Trading Company, and I have the intention, as soon as I get home in a couple days, to make up a few hats. A fellow sent me some and said, please paint these on there. But this is hand painted. You can paint it yourself. I know a few other people that hand painted themselves. In fact, a friend of mine, Lee, got a hard hat, and he had the letters made with sticky backs, and he has the alphabetic letters on the rim of the hard hat all the way around with a little menorah on it.
Cool. Ephraim's Phylactery.
Ephraim's Phylactery. Make your own.
I love that term. That's yours, by the way. That's your patent. All right. Love you, brother. Thanks a lot.
Shalom.
Shalom.